The Titanic needs no introduction, so I'll just get right to it in this one. I was browsing Reddit when I came across this very dumb theory about the captain of the Titanic, Edward J. Smith. Now, I can't find the original TikTok that was uploaded nor the account, so for all I know this was specifically made to piss people off on r/Titanic. Regardless, I thought it would be fun to examine the claims presented seriously and see how far off the mark they really are. We all recognize Captain Smith, right? Older gentleman, bushy white beard, went down with the ship, played by Bernard Hill in James Cameron's Titanic. Smith was a seaman for over 40 years, worked for some of the biggest companies at the time, and was known as the Millionaire's Captain. His last words to his crew were, "Be British," and was honored after death with a statue in Staffordshire, England. Now, this TikTok theory makes a whole bunch of claims that are very easily disproven or just don't make any rational sense, so I'm just gonna go through them line by line just for simplicity. The Titanic captain who secretly survived. In April 1912, Captain Edward Smith supposedly died with the Titanic, but in 1940, sailor Edward Pratton died in Baltimore. On his deathbed, he confessed to his wife, "I was the Titanic's captain." The first line there is almost correct, except that Smith actually did die on the Titanic. The rest is just a farce. There is no sailor named Edward Pratton who lived and died in Baltimore who confessed anything to anyone of the sort. At least that I could find. I checked obituaries from the time, there's nothing. I checked newspaper archives. The name doesn't turn up anything, and I'm assuming it's just a fabrication. Smith jumped at the last moment, picked up by a lifeboat. He hid amongst third-class passengers, gave a false name. 30 years living under an alias, working as a dock loader. I don't understand what's trying to be conveyed here. Are they saying that he made it to the very stern of the ship and then jumped off before it plunged underwater like DiCaprio in the movie? The real Captain Smith was last seen generally near the bridge, but accounts vary. Two witnesses say that he ended up in the water and that he swam back to the Titanic so that he could go down with the ship. And others believe that he made it to an upturned lifeboat but lost his grip and then died in the water, or that he was crushed by one of the massive funnels. And how exactly would the captain of the ship, one of the most famous captains in the world, be able to hide after this event? Even if he ended up on a lifeboat with only third-class passengers, nobody recognized him when they boarded the rescue ship Carpathia? Nobody in New York did? Did he change out of his uniform on the lifeboat? Like, what happened there? And finally, we get to that little cherry on top at the end, that he lived for another 30 years while working as a dock loader. Captain Smith was 62 when the Titanic sank. According to Statista, the average lifespan for an English person at the time was around 52. So this TikToker expects you to believe that Smith lived to 92 and that he worked as a shiploader at his advanced age after enduring the most traumatic experience of his life. That's just bad writing, dude. He kept the Titanic's compass and a White Star Line letter. His wife burned the evidence after his death, fearing shame. Historians found Pratton's records only in 1985. Officially, Smith died a hero. Unofficially, he lived with a survivor's shame. The Titanic did not have a compass in the same way that you're probably thinking of. It wasn't a small handheld device or a thing mounted onto a dashboard. It was a giant brass tube fitted on top of a tower on the upper deck of the ship. Because the whole ship was made out of iron, compasses wouldn't work properly unless they were kept some distance from the hull. So it would have been impossible for Captain Smith to have smuggled this out. Now, about his wife burning the evidence, I guess they're saying that Smith remarried after faking his death, because the real Captain Smith was happily married with a daughter and a very spacious manor on Wynn Road in Southampton, and I couldn't find anything about Smith's family ever moving to the United States. I guess it's not the most unbelievable thing about this theory, but it is probably the most insulting to Captain Smith's memory. The last claim is that some unnamed historians found Pratton's records in 1985. This obviously isn't true. Pratton does not appear to have ever existed, nor are there any reports of these records ever being found. Completely bogus. So while this theory is a complete farce, there is a tiny minuscule grain of truth in there. In 1940, the same year that the Tik Tok claimed Smith died in Baltimore, Life magazine published a letter that they had been sent where the author claims that Captain Smith actually died in 1915 in the town of Lima, Ohio. Apparently, a guy had shown up in Lima in 1912 and would only give the name Smith. He was around the correct age and had sailor's tattoos. However, there seems to be no mystery here, as the local newspaper had identified the man as Michael McKenna at the time of his death, and Life had simply missed that fact. There was also another captain from, you guessed it, Baltimore, Maryland, that claimed to have had a very weird encounter with Captain Smith in July of 1912, months after the sinking of the Titanic. This man, Peter Pyrrell, as reported by the New York Times, was another longtime mariner who had actually worked with Captain Smith in the past. Pyrrell reported that he had seen Smith buying a train ticket to Washington, and that Smith had recognized him and said, "Be good, shipmate, until we meet again." There's nothing to support either of these cases actually having been Captain Smith, but it seems pretty clear that the Tik Tok theory mashed a bunch of things together to come up with its premise. The 1940 Life article, Pyrrell's story from Baltimore, and remember that in 1985 the wreck was discovered. I wouldn't be surprised if this was AI generated. It feels like a human would have come up with something simpler and a bit more reasonable. Or at least it would just retell the sightings of Smith after the sinking of the Titanic. But I guess that's where we're at right now. And that's it for this one. This was a shorter video, but I hope you enjoyed it. We're still working on that Civil War era video. It's a big one and I don't want to give too much away, so I hope you tune in for it. If you like our work, please consider liking and subscribing, ringing the bell, commenting, whatever you feel like it. Until next time, stay mysterious.
A couple sitting underneath a willow tree for